Online multiplayer for the most part is great, but my lord, paying to play online on console fucking sucks. Now, this has been a topic of discussion in the gaming world for a long ass time now, pretty much since the 360 era. Since then, we've seen many versions of PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live, and Nintendo's various online services. Now, I think almost everyone can agree that being required to pay for these services in order to play online with your friends is hella annoying, and shouldn't even be a thing to deal with at all. But, before we get into all of that, we first have to start from the beginning, a time where online gaming was still at its infancy. Now, technically speaking, even before the 6th generation introduced online multiplayer to consoles, online multiplayer in the overall gaming space technically wasn't that new at all. The PC gaming space in the 1990s pretty much pioneered and popularized online multiplayer. Games such as Bungie's original Marathon games, id Software's Doom and Quake games, and Epic Games' Unreal Tournament were some of the many games that popularized online gaming on PC. Even Half-Life, believe it or not, was also highly influential due to its many community mods that later birthed iconic franchises such as Counter-Strike and Team Fortress. And it wasn't all FPS games either. Blizzard's early Diablo, Warcraft, and Starcraft games were also highly influential for multiplayer games on PC. Many players back in the day experienced this by using online connections such as LAN parties and dial-up internet, which probably sounds like a fucking ancient language to a lot of people my age, but to put it shortly, it was the connections a lot of people used during the early days of the internet. Hell, some areas still use dial-up internet to this day. Anyways, PC gaming has definitely paved the way for a lot of games and their online features. Local multiplayer for consoles was also getting popular as well, with games such as GoldenEye 007 pioneering 4-player split-screen multiplayer. However, once we get to the turn of the millennium, everything will change for both consoles and PCs. Once we get to the 6th generation of consoles, this is where gaming for both console and PC changed forever. PC gaming in particular saw the releases of games such as Counter-Strike Source and Diablo 2, which further built upon what the previous entries established. This is where PC gamers will also see the release of MMOs such as World of Warcraft and RuneScape, which became massively influential and are still going on to this day. Now, although online console gaming was still in its infancy, the PS2, Dreamcast, and to some extent the GameCube were the first to implement online multiplayer into their consoles. The PlayStation 2's online, while not perfect, had surprisingly extensive support for a lot of games such as the early Call of Duty games, SOCOM 2, the original Star Wars Battlefront games, and a ton others. However, I think one of the most influential games for online gaming on console was definitely Phantasy Star Online. Originally released back in the year 2000 for the Sega Dreamcast, Phantasy Star Online pioneered online cooperative multiplayer RPGs and MMOs for consoles, which, as mentioned before, was really only a PC thing with aforementioned games such as Diablo, World of Warcraft, and RuneScape. It allowed for people to play with other players and explore many different areas while grinding for loot, experience, and fighting different enemies and bosses, which was pretty much unheard of for console gaming. This game will later influence other cooperative online console games such as Monster Hunter, which would release the same decade and also become massively successful and influential. The game was also later released on the original Xbox as well. Oh shit, speaking of that, despite not selling as many units as its competitor, the PlayStation 2, Microsoft's Xbox was the console that changed multiplayer on consoles forever. How so? Well, let's set the stage real quick. After a pretty good run with Mac and PC games such as Marathon, Myth, and Oni, Bungie decided to create a new game known as Halo. Envisioned to be an ambitious open-world third-person shooter, it was originally supposed to be released on PC and Mac computers. However, to put it shortly, after some troubled development and financial trouble, they were later acquired by Microsoft in the year 2000, and were now set to release Halo as a launch title for the Xbox. Only having 9 months to basically completely rework and finish development on the game, Halo Combat Evolved officially released alongside the original Xbox in 2001. Now, you may be asking yourself, Chase, why bring all this up? Well, dear viewer, not only do I love talking about gaming history like this, but it's also great to know since Halo will not only revolutionize first-person shooters on consoles, but it'll also be a major component in both local and online multiplayer. Now, while Halo CE didn't have online in its original Xbox release, it did impact local multiplayer with 4-player split screen and previously mentioned LAN parties, which allowed up to 16 players. Now, once Xbox Live dropped back in 2002, this offered what was at the time a revolutionary online experience on console, which allowed for online play, DLCs, friends lists, and voice chat, by making use of broadband network connections, which became the standard for what we use today. Now, while definitely not being the first or only game to popularize Xbox Live, Halo 2 was definitely the main game that got people to not only subscribe to Xbox Live, but help revolutionize online gaming on console by introducing matchmaking, in-game voice chat, ranking systems, etc. Oh yeah, now that I mention it, you did have to pay for Xbox Live back then, which is around $49.99 a year. Make sure to keep this in mind for later. Now, with the 7th generation of consoles, online multiplayer will get even bigger, but at the same time, there will also be a major component cropping up that would unfortunately become the standard. Now, with the 7th generation of consoles in the mid-2000s to early 2010s, we see some interesting developments in terms of online gaming. Both console and PC gaming got even bigger, with games such as Halo 3 and Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare further revolutionizing online console gaming. On the PC side of things, this is also where we see the rise of games such as Team Fortress 2, CSGO, and the Left 4 Dead games, which also help further push PC gaming to new heights and receive console versions as well. This is also where we see the rise of online stores, DLCs and updates that were even bigger in scope, entertainment apps such as Netflix and Hulu, and a ton of other possibilities that weren't possible during the previous generations. Now, this generation is also where we see the rise of the PlayStation Network. Xbox Live had gotten even bigger and more successful than before, and Nintendo was doing whatever the fuck they were doing with their online service on the Wii and DS. The PS3 also introduced PlayStation Plus, which at the time was only a subscription you'd get if you wanted bonuses, which included exclusive discounts, free games, cloud saves, and plenty of other cool features. Now, for both the PS3 and Wii, online play is free and only required an internet connection. But in the case of Xbox Live, you still have to pay a subscription fee in order to play the games online on Xbox 360. This time, you could choose between monthly and yearly plans. Now, despite the Xbox 360 arguably having the best online experience out there, out of the 3 consoles, it is still a bummer that you had to pay to play online, especially since the other 2 were free. Unfortunately, this would negatively impact the gaming industry once the 8th and 9th generation approach. Now we're here in the present day. Ever since the 8th generation of consoles, every platform, aside from PC, now required you to play online. Once the PlayStation 4 launched, Sony took some cues from Microsoft and decided to lock online play behind the PlayStation Plus subscription service. Now, Nintendo did still have free online play with the now discontinued Nintendo Network back in the Wii U and 3DS era, but shortly after the Nintendo Switch release, they also decided to lock online play behind the Nintendo Switch Online subscription service, which also included similar features to its competitors such as cloud saves and free games via Nintendo Classics. Since then, we've seen so many changes with this model. With the PS5, Sony decided to merge PlayStation Plus with its PlayStation Now service in order to create the different tiers of PlayStation Plus, which is now known as Essential, Extra, and Premium. Microsoft did something similar afterwards where they merged Xbox Live Gold with Xbox Game Pass. Nintendo, while also being the cheapest to pay for, they too made some changes to their online subscription service, such as adding the expansion pack tier, which also gives you access to games from consoles such as the N64, and also gives you access to certain DLCs like for Mario Kart 8 or Animal Crossing New Horizons, for example. All of these services, while they do have their perks, shouldn't be a requirement for playing online and console in my opinion. I feel like not enough people talk about this either. The trend became so normalized in the 7th generation and especially the 8th generation that most people don't really bat an eye anymore. especially since we see these companies raise the prices on these services in order to get more money. Me personally, I think they should go back to what PlayStation Plus originally did in the PlayStation 3 era. Sure, it was a subscription for your console, but it wasn't required for online multiplayer. It was just there if you wanted more for your console. But you know, Microsoft back in the day probably knew that by locking online multiplayer behind a subscription, more people would be inclined to buy it since they would want to play with their friends on console. Which is why I also think other companies follow suit. I mean, sure, you can play free-to-play online games without the subscription, but it would be still nice to not have to pay for it with any other online game, you know? But hey, at least a big advantage of playing on PC is the fact that you don't need to pay a single dime to play online. So that's something great that's being kept consistent throughout the years. Despite the fact that we have to pay for online, it might not be all bad. Maybe once the Steam machine comes out, it'll be a competitor worthy enough to combat the consoles, since it has free online play due to being basically a PC console hybrid. That way, maybe the big three could see this and change their models a bit, or maybe we can make our voices louder and hopefully make a change in order to have online play on consoles free again, or at the very least a lower price point. Speaking of letting our voices be heard, I think we need to do the same when it comes to predatory microtransactions. So if you want to see my take on that, make sure to take a little peep at the video on screen.